Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale on what is, I guess it's Big 12 Media Week. In July, we're getting closer to the season. And Shane, it cannot come soon enough.
Well, it's Big 12 Media Week, the Mike Gundy and Deion Sanders show. Mike Gundy says stupid stuff, and Deion Sanders says, they shouldn't say hold my beer in this case, but yeah, it's Las Vegas. Be a great place to hold a basketball tournament. Maybe the Big 12 will look into that at some point, but it's a little surreal to be associated with all these teams and these new schools, and but at least you got some familiar faces there. Whether it's I didn't like that photo that I think the Big 12 posted with Sparky sitting in the front seat and then Wilbur and a couple of the others in the back seat, but no, it's still sinking in, and it's obviously very real. The Pac-12 network is no more. The Pac-2 is, I guess they had the little Pac-2 After Dark show where Oregon State and Washington State did, but we are well on our way. And then Arizona was very well represented at Big 12 Media Day, and we are there's officially college football again next month, and that's a weird thought because it doesn't that the Alamo Bowl still doesn't seem like that long ago, does it?
No, it really doesn't. I mean, it's crazy that it was the end of December, and now we're 7 months later, and we're already talking about the next season. And you know how it's time for football season? Because when Phil Steele, the guru of college football, joins us on the program for the fourth straight July, we're getting close. So we'll talk to him on this show. A lot of great stuff from Phil, as always.
Yeah, four straight. I actually was thinking third, and then we talked beforehand that it's actually 4 straight years. So you think back to before the 1-11 season and how far Arizona's come, and then we'll have to talk to Phil a little bit about his computer model and
go easy on him. Don't go hard on him there.
I won't. He's fantastic. I agree. He's very generous with his time. We appreciate it. But he did have Arizona's defense dead last and among all FBS teams going into last year. So we got to find out what happened there. But
take your bets. Take your bets right now on how long it'll take Shane to ask that question.
Someone's got to.
Because I'm not going to do it. Okay. So this one's on Shane. You take your bets as you listen to the first segment. It is time for Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off of one of those beauties. And make sure after you buy one to fill out the post-purchase survey and mention Shane and myself in Wildcat Country, and we will be most grateful. All right, number one in Buy or Sell. I mean, this is a football-related show and about Arizona and other things, but we'll start with some of the big news here. Buy or sell, Shane, the new alternate helmets that were unveiled by Arizona football with script on the side.
Well, you know that no football is being played yet when that is the number one buy or sell. It's a big deal, but it would usually, during football season, it'd be like number 3 or number 4 on the list. But okay, so last week I had Arizona ranked higher in our Big 12 predictions than you did, but we can't have me being Mr. Optimistic or Mr. Positive 2 weeks in a row, right? I know the reaction's been almost entirely positive to the Cats logo. I guess it's a logo and just happens to be the word cats on there. Been almost entirely positive. Here's my question. Would the average college football fan, say he lives in the East or in the Midwest somewhere, instantly associate that helmet with the University of Arizona? Like if they looked at it without any context, would they know that was a University of Arizona helmet?
No.
Yeah. So that, I think everyone knows the block A by now, but the word cats on there, to me, in Wildcats, by the way, is, as far as I know, the 3rd most commonly used mascot in college sports. I think the Bulldogs and Tigers are the only 2 that are more common. So it's just a bit too generic for my taste. And if you're looking for an alternate logo on a helmet, I would have gone with the old A that was used through most of the 80s. Arizona beat ASU a lot of times wearing those, or the cactus logo. I think I feel aggressively fine about it, put it that way. So, but I'm not as enamored with it as most people are. I'm glad most people like it. That's great. But from my perspective, I guess I would have to sell it.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to sell it, and I'll tell you why. I love the colors. I think the chrome is cool, but the script of cats, it's not original.
Well, that surprises me. I thought you'd be like, oh, Shane, come on. Why are you being so negative?
Now, I will say this. If there was an image of that with red jerseys, anytime there are red jerseys for Arizona football, kind of like matching my shirt here, I'm all for it. When it comes to script on the helmets that just says cats when there are other logos such as the Retro A
Yeah.
or the Cactus logo that we've seen on the basketball court, I think it's a big miss. So the colors, yes, and there will be more uniform stuff, I guess, that we're going to find out. But right now, I'm going to gently sell this one. And some of you like it and great. I mean, don't get on our case for this one. I know we got some crap, or I got some crap.
It's fine if you do.
For a lazy take last week with our rankings. One guy on YouTube. Okay, great. This is not a lazy take of this helmet. I just aesthetically, a logo is better than script. I'll just say that.
But I am happy that most fans seem to like it, so it's not a big deal. And I mean, I'm not get too hung up on uniforms. And honestly, usually the best teams in college football, they're not the ones changing up their uniforms and their helmets all the time, if you think about it. But I'm okay with adding some excitement to it, and I'm sure you want to generate some revenue and sell some mini helmets and all that, and that's fine. But again, like I feel fine about it. I don't feel as happy about it as a lot of fans do.
All right, number 2, Shane. On one sportsbook, Arizona's 7-1 to win the Big 12 championship game. On another sportsbook, they're 10-1, and on another one, FanDuel, they are 15-1 to win the Big 12 championship game. That's a big difference. Now, at 15-1 odds, is that enough to entice you, who some can consider more negative when it comes to Arizona sports in general success, to possibly bet on them to win the Big 12 conference in football?
Well, again, I'm higher on them going into the season than you are, but also it's not so much that as I'm just not nearly the gambler that you are. But yeah, 15-1, I think I'd take that. Look, and I didn't even know that until you told me, but I might even live dangerously, Eric, and maybe put $5 on Arizona 15-1. That's what I would probably do. But yeah, I think that those are some pretty good odds. You look at a team that won 10 games a year ago, has the nation's second longest winning streak, which is still crazy to me, and returns a lot of talent from last year despite the head coaching change, and just moved to a conference that is not nearly as top heavy as the Pac-12 was last year with Washington and Oregon. Yeah, I think 15-1 is tempting, and I'd probably go for it if you're the gambling type.
You know what, Shane? This is going to be kind of weird for me to say. I think this is a must bet at this number. When you see that it's more than twice a number that's on another competing sports book, I mean, this is just a miss by FanDuel to have Arizona like 7th or 8th in the conference when UCF is 10-1, especially with Noah Fafita, Tetero McMillan. I like what Brent Brennan says. I like the staff that he's brought in. I like the transfers he's brought in, and I like the schedule that Arizona plays. At these odds, I think it's a must bet. So
now,
FanDuel.
Yeah. We do talk sometimes, or you talk sometimes, Eric, about how some lines, not necessarily like a futures bet, but like a weekly, a line on a certain game seems a little fishy, like it's too good to be true sort of thing. Does FanDuel maybe know something we don't, or is it just a miss on their part, you think?
I think it's a miss on their part. I mean, I think when it comes to futures, we know the odds of Arizona winning the conference aren't great. But when one book has it 7-1, DraftKings 10-1, and now you're getting such value here, I think it's whatever your bet size is. Yeah, I'd probably take a look, whether it's $5, $15, or $50, or maybe even higher. I would take a look at it. I think that's really good value there. All right, number 3, Jedfish kind of getting a lot of credit nationally for Arizona's success last year, but there was a tweet put out that came out, I think, over the weekend or early this week that basically said, do you know that Jedfish's record with Arizona prior to putting in Noah Fafita, it was 10-19. And Jed really, let's be honest, if Jaden Delora didn't get hurt, probably is not putting in Fafita anytime soon. So is Jed getting too much credit, buy or sell, because he kind of lucked into the success last year?
All right. Well, I think two things can be true here. First, Jedfish definitely, however you feel about the guy now, does deserve a lot of credit for turning around Arizona football. Okay. The situation he took over was, in my opinion, even worse than the situation Mike Stoops took over post John Makovic. He returned an awful program back to relevance faster than I think anyone could have reasonably expected. Not just relevance, but beyond that. Even in the transfer portal age, he did a remarkable job. But the other part is, he did benefit from Jaden Delora's injury, and he ultimately was able, when Delora went down, Noah Fafita came in and was a star, and what looked like maybe a 500 season turned into a 10-win season. So And Jed was ultimately able to utilize that, to leverage that, to double his pay and be attractive to a team coming off a national championship game appearance because of that. So I think it's fair to believe that if Delora was Arizona's starting quarterback through the 2023 season, like you said, Jed Fish would probably still be Arizona's head coach. Probably because they wouldn't have been attracted, or they would have won somewhere in the 6 to 8 game range, more likely, and that wouldn't have been attractive enough for a program like Washington to look at. Their fans would have scoffed at it, but 10 wins, 7 wins in a row to end the season, fans are looking, oh, yeah, okay, that's a good replacement for Kalen DeBoer. So I think Jed deserves all the credit in the world for turning around Arizona football, but I will buy that he's probably getting a bit more credit than he deserves, specifically for the reason you mentioned.
All right, so I'm going to sell this one, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes, as a coach or anything in life, you luck into something. And you can say that about the Fafita decision. It wasn't a genius stroke of coaching. But the fact is, he recruited these players.
Yeah.
And he knew that Noah Fafita at some point was going to be Arizona's quarterback. And it just happened to be sooner than later. So, yeah, you know what? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, he recruited him. And for that reason, I think Jed's coaching was kind of overrated. I said that at the time. I said I wasn't sure even last year when they were going through the success. I said I wasn't sure how good Jed was going to be calling plays. Now, Fafita just happened to pick up the offense so well and have such good chemistry with T-Mac and the other receivers, Tanner McLaughlin and, Jacob Cowling, etc. So, yeah, while he did luck into it, I'm not going to say he was overrated just because of his recruiting prowess. What he did in turning around the program in that regard, I think is worthwhile. All right, you want to talk about this one? It's not really an Arizona thing. But Mike Gundy is an idiot for his comments regarding running back Ollie Gordon at Big 12 Media Day. Shane, have at it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this one because I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. I think Mike Gundy is a very good head coach, and I've always respected him. I know that the whole "I'm a man, I'm 40" thing has become a meme, but he was defending one of his players that day, and he went a little over the top in doing it. But I respect the heck out of him for doing that. His comments on Media Day were immensely irresponsible and just incredibly stupid. For those who don't know, and I'm sure if you listen, you probably do, but just to recap, Ollie Gordon, their star running back at Oklahoma State, was cited for DUI. He had a blood alcohol content of 0.11, which is well over the legal limit. And in response, at Media Day, Mike Gundy's asked about it. He said that Gordon will not be suspended. And he noted that Gordon probably had just 2, 3, maybe 4 beers. Now, based on Gordon's weight, he's about 215 pounds. He probably would have had to have at least 3 beers, probably 4, to get that loaded. And then Mike Gundy said, quote, because I don't want to take it out of context, "I'm not justifying what Ollie did. I'm telling you the decision I made. I thought, okay, I've probably done that 1,000 times in my life, and it was just fine. So I got lucky. People get lucky." First of all, I care far less about any sort of suspension for Ollie Gordon than I do the message that his head coach just sent to all college football players, to his own as well, which is that, and I am being, this is the message he sent, whether he wanted to clarify his comments or not. His message was intoxicated driving isn't that big a deal. And he's done it a bunch of times. Now, for anyone whose lives have been turned upside down by someone who had roughly the same amount to drink as Ollie Gordon did that night he decided to get behind the wheel of a car, I can't imagine what they must think about what Mike Gundy said. And especially at a day and age where it's never been easier to get a ride home when you're intoxicated and just not take that chance. And my other takeaway, I'm almost done, I promise. My other takeaway is Mike Gundy is a man who is very certain and secure in his job security. Because I can't imagine a head coach who wasn't that secure saying something so completely reckless and idiotic. We haven't known Brent Brennan for that long, but I think you'll agree with this. I can't imagine him saying anything like that. And it's disappointing. And I certainly hope that young student athletes don't listen to that clip and decide that driving after a few beers now isn't a big deal, because we were reminded again Thursday, it's a problem among college athletes. Driving recklessly or intoxicated or a combination thereof, they usually go together, right? I just can't believe someone like Mike Gundy would say that. And I'm not trying to be over dramatic. I promise I'm not. But I am really disappointed in someone who I previously respected a great deal.
Yeah, I think it's a extremely his comments were extremely stupid. He said the only punishment will be to give him the ball 50 times in game one. I mean, that is so tone deaf
Yeah.
by Mike Gundy. I couldn't agree more. It's too bad Arizona doesn't play him this year. Boo the crap out of him. I really am I think you said it best. Lost respect for him. And I'll tell you what, if I'm in Oklahoma State's athletic department, I got to be super pissed because that is just he looks like a fool.
Yeah, I'm sure someone reached out to him because he tweeted about he regretted the way he said something, whatever. And then I think it's just basically a slap on the wrist. And look, I'm not again. This isn't about like a competition thing. Well, Arizona's in the Big 12, and I'm pretending to be disgusted by it, and I think everyone should be suspended or fired. It's nothing like that. I'm just upset because everyone knows someone or knows someone who knows someone. A couple of these degrees of separation who's had their lives impacted by a DUI, by a crazy driver one way or the other. And I Mike Gundy comes off to me as an enabler when he says something like that. And it
Yeah, I
really
agree.
makes
I
me
agree.
mad.
Yeah, it was really a stupid comment, and that one will stick with him.
Yeah.
And it's hard to root for a guy like Ollie Gordon, and it's hard to root for Oklahoma State's program when you hear something like that.
I'll tell you what, you talked about rivalries, Eric. What team's going to become a rival? I mean, I don't know how big this thing is going to become now, but I'll tell you next time I'm really rooting for Arizona to beat the crap out of Oklahoma State next time they play, whenever that might
Would
be.
you root for ASU to beat Oklahoma State when they play this year?
Oh, let's not go nuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Number five here. This is kind of a bonus question. There are rumors out there that the ACC is the next conference that may break up, even though there's a grant of rights. I think some schools may just say, screw it, I'm out. If the Big 12 were to expand, what realistic schools would you like to see join this conference?
What I like to see or versus what makes sense. I mean, I feel like geography is kind of out the window already. I
In the
mean,
Big 12, yeah, it's up
from
there.
Arizona to Florida to West Virginia now, I mean, it's pretty much a national conference. It's hard to say what makes sense these days. I certainly we've heard Florida State, maybe Clemson. I don't know, maybe a couple other schools from the ACC. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd just go back to I'd love to see more of a regional aspect to it. Maybe you get to a situation where you add a few more teams and you can have, you can actually have divisions again. Something like that would make sense. So you play those teams every single year, and then maybe play a handful of others. But I'm not really sure, like geographically what makes sense and what doesn't anymore in a world where Cal and Stanford and SMU are in the ACC, and Oregon and Washington and UCLA and USC are in the Big Ten, which is traditionally Midwest country. I'm not trying to cop out of the question. I just don't have a good answer because I feel like regional conferences, at least at the power level, are really out the window now.
What I would like to see the Big 12 do is be the first conference to 24 and make 4 6-team divisions. And you
Mm.
can do that with Arizona by getting Cal and Stanford and Arizona State and Washington and Utah and Colorado.
Mm.
So those 6 schools right there. I think it would make a lot of sense to do that. I don't know what you do with Washington State and Oregon State. That one's kind of a tricky one, but
Yeah.
if you were to do that, and then I think if they were to go take a Florida State, a Clemson, North Carolina for basketball, Virginia for basketball. I mean, if they could raid the ACC and develop an East Coast, put West Virginia with somebody over there, and then you have kind of the heartland, 12 schools in the heartland, and you have 6 out west. I think it makes sense. I really think a 2014 conference is something I'd like to see.
Well, we've talked about how I think we both think, I know I do, and I think you do as well, I think there's just going to be continued consolidation among the big conferences to where we have 2 or maybe 3 major conferences. The Big 12 sounds like it may absorb the ACC, and then maybe the other schools pick up, or the other conferences rather, pick up the pieces of what's left. And so it'd be kind of funny if we just all like reset. We got down to 2 conferences, and then we split everyone up into regional divisions, and we're just kind of back to where we started, just in a different form. I feel like maybe that's where we're headed eventually when all the dust settles. And again, I guess the only thing I'm glad about it, well, I'm disappointed, still very disappointed to see the Pac-12 gone as we know it. I'm glad Arizona and did not get left out in the cold like Washington State and Oregon State did, and it looks like they're in a pretty good position going forward, regardless of where all the dust settles.
So, Wildcat Country is brought to you by an awesome sponsor. That's Harrah's Auction Casino, which is the only Valley casino with Caesars Rewards, the player's card that pays for Vegas and more. In fact, the reward credits you earn with Caesars Rewards can be redeemed for hotel stays, dining, and more at 50 destinations across the country, including Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe, New Orleans, and dozens of others. Sign up, play, and earn Caesars Rewards only at Harrah's Auction Casino. One card, 50 destinations to enjoy your perks. Check them out this summer and, of course, this fall on your way to or from Tucson before or after games. A great place, kind of in between the Phoenix area and Tucson, and just a cool place to go hang out and win some prizes, win some money. It'd be a great weekend if you win some money at Harrah's Auction Casino, stay, have a relaxing weekend, and go down and see an Arizona win.
I thought
that's kind of what
I thought you were going to say you win some money and you get to meet Eric and Shane because we're going to do a live post game show there at some point. We're not sure when yet partly because we don't know the times of the games yet, and we got to fit it into our schedule. Well, mainly me because I have a 5-year-old. But we're going to do a live post game show after likely a road game because you're at all the home games, I know. And so we'll figure that out and we'll let you know when that happens, and then hopefully you'll be able to join us out there.
Coming up next, the guru, as I like to call him, of college football, Phil Steele, joins us for the 4th straight year here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, the proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Shane, there are certain things that are rites of passage every year, and one of them for me is to pre-order the Phil Steele magazine and, of course, have Phil on our program to talk about Arizona football. But let me tell you, it's almost 400 pages, maybe even more now, of goodness. I haven't even dove into it that much, but I don't know how Phil does it. He'll tell us at the end of the show. Every year he does, explains how it works. But Phil, glad to have you back on. Now, I don't want to give away what you posted about Arizona fully in the magazine, but you have them as a -7 in your stock market indicator. Why are you a little bearish on Arizona this year?
Yeah, I do a lot of different metrics in the magazine, and a lot of them point out to things that are 75% accurate as far as projecting whether the team's going to improve or decrease the record the next year. Now, the stock market indicator simply looks at the record the 2 years prior to last year, which would have been 1 win and 5 wins, and then divides them by 2, which makes it 3. So their average win total prior to last year was 3. Last year, they had 10 wins. Generally, as the stock market indicator has pointed out, when teams make a jump like that, go from an average of 3 wins up to 10, which is -7, they have a weaker record the next year. So that's simply looking at it the stock market-wise. There's always exceptions to the rule, but -7 is a pretty hefty category.
Yeah, well, Phil, like Eric said, this is the 4th straight year you've joined us. We appreciate it, and certainly Arizona football it's taken a couple steps forward since that long losing streak that we try to keep forgetting, but I just brought up, so it makes it tricky. So Arizona, obviously, they had a coaching change from Jedd Fisch to Brent Brennan. I think Brent and his staff did a great job retaining a lot of talent from last year, and I think they've done okay in the transfer portal. My concern always for a first-year coach, even one that's been successful in retaining a lot of players from the previous year, is you never know how everything's going to gel between a new staff and players from the previous regime. Just in your experience, how big a deal is that? And after meeting with Brent Brennan, how do you think he's going to be able to navigate that?
Yeah, and generally, and I point this out in the front of the magazine on page 3, I think it is, where I talk about where I rank the coaches. I usually rank a first-year head coach below where they normally would rank, just because of what you just said. They have to learn the players' strengths and weaknesses. The players generally have to learn new systems, and especially in the era of the transfer portal, once a head coach opts to leave, now all the players can opt to leave. And I thought Arizona did a good job. I think Noah Fafita and Tatori McMillan both coming out and saying we're staying at Arizona, I think was a big plus to them retaining a lot of players from last year's squad. But generally, first-year head coaches, there is a learning curve for the players. There's a learning curve for the coaches. So generally been my experience with it. And going over the team, by the way, with Coach Brennan, I'll say this. I went over his first team that he had at San Jose State, and he was a first-year head coach that had never even been a coordinator, and he had two coordinators that had never been coordinators before, or he had never been a head coach. They had never been coordinators, and you expected San Jose to be very weak that year. They were. He did a great job building that San Jose program. So I think Brent Brennan is a heck of a coach, and I've gone over the team with him all 8 years he's been a head coach.
All right, well, let's start with the on the defensive side of the ball, because you ranked Arizona last in FBS last year, and they Oh, I'm not saying that I'm just noting that they overperformed, but then of course
you hit it. You hit it. I always go through my my rankings when I do the offense and the defense, and I always say, hey, my computer had this team at this, and this is where they finished. My computer. I've never had a team ever have it like Arizona did last year. My computer called for them to allow 38.2 points per game, and they allowed 21 points per game. Never has my computer had that big of a loss. And the biggest change, of course, last year was the rush defense. And when I talked to Coach Fish prior to the year, he had said, Phil, we brought in all these guys. We're going to be improved. But, I mean, they allowed 5.6 yards per carry, 209 yards per game rushing the previous year. To improve that to 118 yards per game rush, 3.6 yards per carry, it was the biggest miss ever for my computer, offensively or defensively. But go ahead. Back to your question.
Well, no, that's fascinating, though. And hopefully you haven't ranked higher this year, so hopefully you don't miss by quite as much this year. But just looking at the defense and some of the guys who have transferred, obviously they lose Bill Norton, Ephesians Prysock to the transfer portal, and some other guys just who aren't eligible anymore. They added some decent pieces from some in the transfer portal and from some FCS schools. How do you think this year's defense stacks up with last year's?
Yeah, I think the defense is going to be just as good as last year's. I don't think they're going to show the improvement that last year's did, but to be just as good, allowing 21.1 points per game, that's a pretty good area to be in. And, you know, I think if I have a question defensively, it would be up front once again. And they basically lose all four starters from last year, and that means a lot of new players coming in. They did bring in a San Jose State transfer and Trey Smith, a Stanford transfer and Lance Kennelly, USC transfer, a Syracuse transfer. So they brought in a lot of transfers again. Not sure if they're up to where last year's were, but you look at the linebacking core and then that secondary. The secondary's got is just loaded with talent. Maldonado and Johnson at safety, one of the better safety combos in the country. I rate the DBs number 25 in the country, the linebackers number 39. And if they figure out the defensive line, they should be at least as good as last year.
All right, Phil, I want to ask you about Arizona's defensive backs. You have them ranked 25th, but this is a veteran unit. Gunnar Maldonado, Tacario Davis, who is a potential first-round pick. Why would you say that why would you rank those players or that unit a little lower than I would expect?
Well, they finished number 24 in my past defense rankings last year, and it's just the way the computer came out with it this year. And of course, there's my own thought process goes into it. But yeah, there's so much talent there at defensive back. I may just have ranked them a little bit lower than I should have. That's Maldonado and Johnson, like I said, one of the best safety combos. You bring in a Louisville cornerback and Groves Killebrew, Tacario Davis at the other cornerback spot. This is a team that's loaded in the secondary.
Let's talk about offensively. You know, Tedero McMillan is one of the best receivers in the country. I think you had him, you know, up there on your list of wide receivers, but you have Arizona's unit as 20th, I believe. Did you just not buy into the depth necessarily behind him after losing Jacob Cowling?
Keep in mind, I also include the tight ends in the position as well. And so it's wide receiver and tight ends make up the receiving core. And there are a lot of good tight ends out there. There's just not an established tight end here for Arizona. Now, Burnett is a guy that's an explosive player. He went into the transfer portal, came back out, but he only had 2 starts, 3 receptions last year. Sam Olsen's a guy that came over from San Jose. A little bullish on him. He did have a couple starts last year, 22 receptions, but the tight end is included into it. So it's not just about 1 or 2 players. It's the overall unit, but and that's one where I think that the big question mark is going to be depth. There's no question about McMillan. Lamonius Craig, no question mark, but the rest of the unit, the depth is a little bit of a question.
Now, speaking of depth, Phil, let's talk about the running back room. Arizona lost a lot of talent, including Jonah Coleman, who followed Jed and Scotty Graham to Washington. seems like they did a great job reloading at that position, of course, with adding Krosky Merritt in particular, then Quali Conley from San Jose State. How do you rate this year's running back depth versus last year?
I think it's comparable, no doubt about it. I love Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. Just watch him run at New Mexico. I watch 12 games all day long, and I'm like, wow, this guy's impressive. And Conley coming over from San Jose State, he was nearly, he's a guy that put up big yardage over there. He had nearly 1,000 yards last year. He had 1,000 yards the year before. So just having those two guys is great. And then you go even number 3, Rashawn Luke. He's a guy that's speed and space, and he had a fantastic spring. And he was my number 20 rated running back coming out of high school. And you can even go down to the number 4 spot, Kedrick Riscano. He's a guy that transfers in from Ole Miss. It was also my number 20 running back out of high school. So that's great depth. To have 2 what I call VHTs, or very highly touted running backs, as your number 3 and number 4 backs, 2 very established guys at 1-2. That is a loaded running back room this year, very comparable to last year.
Agreed. Yeah. Let's look at the Arizona's first Big 12 schedule. I got Kansas State on it, even though it's not a Big 12 game, but essentially 10 Big 12 opponents at Kansas State, at Utah, certainly on paper look like the most challenging. Compare Arizona's conference schedule with the rest of the Big 12. Do they have it a little easier, a little tougher, about the same? Where do you put them?
Yeah, and if you throw Kansas State out of the mix, which they're not a conference game,
right?
I did a blog on philsteele.com back in the spring, which went over the schedule strengths for every team in every conference. Arizona's number 16 in the Big 12, and that's where you want to be. If you want to be number 16 in any category in a conference, you want to be in schedule strength. They draw one big boy, Utah. They avoid Kansas State in league play. They avoid Oklahoma State. They avoid Iowa State, and of course don't have to play themselves. So they only play one of the big boys this year in Utah. They face them on the road. The Kansas State does not count in the equation, in my mind, if you're looking at Big 12 schedule. So I think they've got the best schedule of any of the teams in the Big 12 this year.
So Phil, based on that, what would you say is a realistic win total that Arizona fans should be happy with if the team achieves that this season?
I would say 9, I'd be happy, and 10 would be great, and that's during the regular season. Remember, last year they only won 9 during the regular season, won the 10th game in the bowl. So I think if they can match last year's 10 wins, I'd be very happy as an Arizona State fan. But I think that they are a legitimate contender. In the Big 12, you've got numerous contenders this year. I could, if you said, okay, Phil, you need to spend the next 10 minutes making a case for this team to win the Big 12, I could probably do that for 7, 8, maybe even 9 teams this year, and Arizona would be one of them. So the biggest question marks I have during the season would be at UCF. UCF's going to be tough. That game is always, it's in Florida, and they're going to be a much improved team. TCU as well. On the road, that's going to be tough because I think this year's TCU team, more like 2 years ago TCU team than the one that won 5-7 last year. And, of course, at Utah. Utah is my favorite to win the Big 12 this year. So I think if you're an Arizona fan, hey, let's match last year's record, I'd be happy.
Last question for you, Phil. Always appreciate it. By the way, I just got to point it out because people are going to yell at me if we don't. You called Arizona State just that one time, and that's kind of a big deal. You did, which I know you've got. You're probably talking ASU football at some point today, so no worries. But I just if I didn't note it, our comment section on YouTube would be littered with it. So I just got to point that out.
Slap my hand. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. Hey, I got 2 first names, and people call me Dale all the time, so I get it. So last question for you, circling back to kind of my first question about Brent Brennan. You've gotten to know him over the years, like you've gotten to know so many head coaches. Just what do you think of him, on a personal level? How do you think he's going to how he's going to be able to relate to players and build relationships? Because we've heard from everyone he's a great relationship guy, and maybe how that his personality sort of differs from Jedd Fisch.
Yeah, a tremendous personality guy. And like I said, with Brent Brennan, the first year I talked to him, he was a first-year head coach, had 2 first-year coordinators, and had a very inexperienced team. By the time he left San Jose State, he had a team that was in bowls almost every single year, and a veteran head coach that had won big games. And I've seen the progress from Brent Brennan from year 1 all the way to this 8th year. So I think he's going to fit in very well with Arizona. Different type of head coach, maybe a little more not as fiery, maybe quite as Jed Fish, but I like Brent Brennan a lot, and I think he's a guy that being able to keep the talent that he did at Arizona with that late coaching change, when players could easily have left, and money's being thrown at them, and you could easily go somewhere else. I thought he showed right there the type of head coach he is by keeping the majority of the talent.
All right, Phil, before I let you go, we always talk about this, but I want you to explain it once again to our audience. How do you do all of this on a yearly basis? And what does your football season look like? And then the rewrite schedule. I know you put this in the magazine, but just to kind of briefly explain it to everybody who's listening.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The magazine is a 7-month process. I start the Sunday after Thanksgiving and do the first write-through. And for the first write-through, I read through every article that was written about the team for the previous year, get all the ebbs and flows, not only for the team, but of the positions. And then I write each position based on what kind of shape were they into last year, what happened, what kind of shape are they coming into this year. And so I do the first write-through, and then naturally the transfer portal hits and all that stuff in the off season. The second write-through is when we get the spring rosters, and then you have to readjust each of the write-ups for the teams, change my power ratings, change my up-downs. There's been movement. And then the third write-through is after spring when I talk to the head coaches. And I talked to over 120 of the 134 head coaches each of the last couple of years. And we spend I spend on the average an hour with each head coach going over every player on the team, every position. But it is a labor of love. And really, you could ask me something about the NBA. I couldn't tell you who the top players are. I don't watch any sport but college football. And that's where I spend my entire 7-month off season is college football. During the season, I got 12 TVs in front of me, watching 12 games all day long. I watch the replays of the games during the week. And so it's just college football is my life.
Can I ask one follow-up question if I could, Eric? And by the way, every time you post a photo of your TV setup, I get instantly jealous. But I got to ask, how do you balance, you talked about your computer models, and then you talk about just, your own personal feelings after talking with coaches. How do you balance that in the magazine when putting your rankings together?
Yeah, it's tough because sometimes I do 9 sets of power ratings, and one of my sets of power ratings will call for a team to have 9 wins, and one of my 9 sets of power ratings call for them to have 3 wins. And then I just basically have to go over the schedule, look at the matchups, and come up with my own personal flavor. It's always nice when all 9 sets of power ratings say, hey, this team's going to win 8 wins this year. It's like, all right, that's cool. I don't put a lot of thought process, but it's tough. I think talking to the coaches is a big plus because they really do give you a good feel for each position.
Now, finally, Phil, I want to ask, I know I got my pre-order on philsteele.com, but where can people go and buy the magazine, and what other offerings do you have on philsteele.com that people can purchase?
Yeah, I appreciate that, guys. I appreciate you being a VIP member as well. That's a nice advantage that you get at the start. But right now, don't waste your gas money driving around looking for the magazine. It's at 2 places, 2 bricks and mortar stores. That's at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. I don't know if there's any Books A Millions in Arizona, so Barnes & Noble would probably be your big one to go to. But we are exclusively at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million this year. Now, you can go online at philsteele.com and order the magazine. And if you do that, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge. It costs to ship things. However, we give you the digital magazine for free. And to give you an example, we update the digital magazine all the way through the start of the season. If you go to Utah State and look at the head coach for in the digital magazine, it's already Nate Drelling, who's taken over because they let go of Blake Anderson. So any of those late changes are captured in the digital version. So that's Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com, and a ton of information up there. Check out my daily blogs on philsteele.com each day.
Phil, when I grow up, I want to be you. I'm telling you, this is the greatest life, talking college football and doing it all year. You do a great job. We are big fans, and we really appreciate you joining us here in Wildcat Country for the 4th straight year.
Yeah, I always enjoy talking football with you guys. It's been a lot of fun all 4 years, and look forward to definitely doing it the next 4 years. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi folks, here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for all at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Thanks to Phil Steele for joining us. Great to catch up with him. I mean, just so much knowledge. I mean, the fact that he knows about Arizona just like all these other teams. I mean, can you imagine having a life, Shane, that is simply all college football? It's like a dream come true, right?
Imagine having that many TVs, because Phil always takes photos of his setup each weekend, I think just to rub it into all the rest of us. And just imagine it and just being like turning to your wife and say, oh, yeah, it's for research. I'm doing my job, and actually having it be true. Yeah, pretty cool. And I didn't, I had to mention when he said Arizona State the one time, just because I knew fans would give us crap about it if I didn't. I wasn't trying to make him feel bad. He does a bunch of interviews. I'm sure he was going to talk ASU football later. So no, wealth of knowledge. Really interesting to know that was he's done a lot. How many magazines has he done now? How many straight years? 20 something years now?
It's 20 something years. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been crazy.
And he said this computer models had never been further off than they were on Arizona's defense last year. That's saying something. That's saying something for the jump that Arizona. No one thought Arizona's defense was going to make that big a jump. But the fact that they went from his worst to one of the best in the country is saying something.
All right, our year that we're going to talk about this year, we've been recapping different Arizona sports years this summer. And the one that came up on the wheel this week was 2018-19, which really wasn't a pleasant year for basketball. No. Arizona had their worst team under Sean Miller, and I think they lost at one point to end the season 10 of their last 13 games, which is pretty darn embarrassing. And then we didn't get to see them in the tournament for a couple more years because of COVID in 2019, 2020. So that one was a tough one to swallow. I remember that year and just saying, that one's tough. We had high expectations with Nico Mannion and Josh Green the following year, and Zeke Naji, and we never got to see them in the tournament. So that one kind of hurt. But in terms of football, Shane, there were some bright spots. What do you have as kind of your memory that stands out from that season?
Yeah, unfortunately, this season had more things I'd like to forget than remember, but I did pick out a couple. The big one was this was the first year the very fortunately short Kevin Sumlin era, but they had some bright spots, and the biggest one was the blowout win over Justin Herbert in Oregon in late October that year. Khalil Tate threw for 3 touchdowns, but then J.J. Taylor, he had a monster game. I looked it up. I had forgotten just how big a game he had. Over 200 rushing yards, 212 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns in that game. In just another series of upset wins that Arizona enjoyed over Oregon during like a 10 to 12 year span. Oregon, I think, was ranked 19th at the time, so they weren't as good as they typically are, but still pretty good. Colin Schooler, Tony Fields, you remember those names? They had some big games on defense. So we were feeling pretty okay about the Kevin Sumlin era at that point, and then it was pretty bad from there. It was pretty bad. And then, like you said, the men's basketball team was really the fallout from the Book Richardson arrest, and feeling that that was after the DeAndre Ayton season, and Sean Miller really struggled to recruit, and it showed, and Arizona barely won more games than they lost that year.
Yeah, that one stung. That was a painful season for Arizona. I mean, the Justin Herbert, beating Oregon, as you mentioned, 44-15 was a positive memory. I remember it's the only time I've ever been in the Sands Club was that night. And there was a World Series game on between the Red Sox and the Dodgers. I remember watching that. Dodgers lost, I believe, that night. But the game, it's not a good memory, Shane, but the Territorial Cup that season, Wildcats had a big lead going in the fourth quarter and lost 41-40. And I think that game ruined Kevin Sumlin. I think that was the game that could have changed the tenure of Arizona's Kevin Sumlin era, and that fourth quarter changed it. 3 quarters, they look great.
Yeah, and of course, there are a lot of storylines there, and of course, from ASU's perspective, it was an amazing comeback win, and from Arizona's, it was a complete collapse. And certainly one of the big storylines was Arizona and Noel Mazzoni taking his foot off the gas when Arizona was able to do whatever it wanted on offense. I still remember, because I actually covered the game for ABC 15 at the time, so I wasn't allowed to cheer. And then, of course, if you're part of the press, you get to go on the field at the sideline the last few minutes of the game. And I still remember toward the end of the game, Arizona's running. ASU's making its comeback. Arizona just keeps running the ball up the middle. And I just remember one play in particular. There was just like, have you ever heard 50,000 people collectively groan at the same time? And everyone's just like, what are we doing here? And then ASU came back, took advantage of a turnover, took the lead. And I remember that last possession, Arizona had 3 great chances to get the ball far down the field. Khalil Tate was just doing just freestyling it and freelancing, and he was running back and forth and made some deep throws. He had a man wide open, overthrew him. Another guy, I think it was Ellison in the end zone, dropped the ball in the end zone. And even with all that, Arizona still had a chance to win on a last-second field goal by Pollock. It was a tough field goal, and that's especially in that situation, and he missed it. It was his only miss of the day. So everything had to go wrong for Arizona at the end of that game, and it did. But I do remember before the game, Arizona scaled back its senior day activities and their all the recognition before the game, because I think they're thinking, well, we have another game to play after this because we're going to win. We're going to go to a bowl game, and that didn't happen.
Yeah,
and that didn't happen. And then the seniors didn't get the recognition they typically get. So I think, I think you're right in terms of morale from that. It was bad. I mean, losing to ASU in that fashion, especially after losing to them in a comeback, or they blew a lead the previous year as well in 2017 when Khalil Tate got hurt. That was not quite the beginning of the end, but it was definitely foreshadowing for what was going to come.
Shane, I would say that's probably the second most sickening Arizona State game that I've been to behind the 2010 version with the blocked extra points.
Yeah.
There was a game that, got to make a bowl game. Khalil Tate, Arizona dominates for 3/4 and then absolutely chokes. And unfortunately, I wish that wasn't my main memory from that season.
It's hard not to be, though. It was
that one.
It was rough.
That one stung. For a very disappointing year in general for Arizona athletics. It just wasn't. It wasn't great.
Yeah, the baseball team struggled that year. The softball team that was probably the biggest bright spot. Arizona softball hadn't been to the College World Series in 9 years under Mike Andrea, and until they finally got back in 2019. And that was his second to last College World Series appearance. They made a bunch of super regionals, but after going to the College World Series almost every year and winning a lot of championships, they had a kind of a dry spell for their standards, and they got back. They didn't win it all, but they got back to the College World Series in 2019. But that was a rough year. It's kind of where we're at as far as the Arizona ASU rivalry right now, and beating them in football and men's basketball and women's basketball. Just a few years ago, it was pretty much the opposite, because ASU beat Arizona both games in men's basketball as well. And you had the football game on top of it. So there are a lot of ebbs and flows. So it's a reminder, when things are going this well against your rival and just I know not everything's going great, but when things are going like this overall, enjoy it, because the pendulum always swings back the other way eventually. So enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, never look a great season and a great year over your rival in general. Don't overlook it. And the Wildcats this past year with success, as we talked about, all 5 of the major sports making the postseason, tennis going on a run, for example, not one of the 5, but when you look at football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball winning the conference, and then softball, a very successful overall season. I think we could say one of the best in general, where everybody contributed in a long time.
Did you see that someone put together this win-loss records of all the I guess you call it the power schools over the last 3 years in a combined record over the last 3 years in football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and softball.
Really?
Over the last 3 years, yeah. 70 teams that have all 5 of those programs.
Okay.
Some teams are missing one, usually either softball or baseball. Arizona, I don't have a chart in front of me. I think they were 22nd out of 70 for the last 3 years. So that's pretty good. And so most Arizona fans are going to look at Arizona. What's the next team they're going to look at? They're going to, okay, where's ASU? ASU out of 70 teams, 69th. In the last 3 years.
Right?
Yeah, just ahead of Cal. If you combine their football, both basketball teams, baseball and softball in the last 3 seasons, they are collectively below 500. So again, not everything's going great. I know that we're still anxious to get back to a Final Four. We're worried about, after a head coaching change in football, but enjoy it. Enjoy the moments where things are going pretty well overall. You're enjoying some success over your rival, because you never know how long it's going to last.
I think after doing the show, and those of you listening to the show, I think we can all agree on one thing. Football can't come soon enough. Thanks to Phil Steele for joining us. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening, and as always, bear down.